12/23/19. Good and so-so bombshells, semicolon, more sausage with Rob. There, I've written 3 pieces in the last day and a half. I wrote 2 yesterday, 3 segments in the last day and a half. I wrote 2 yesterday and I wrote 1 this morning. Now I woke up this morning. The first segment involved the movie Bombshell, my experience of watching the movie Bombshell, which recently came out, and I saw that on Saturday. So that was Saturday, December the 21st. So that was the first one. I woke up this morning, Monday, December the 23rd, with a nagging feeling that there was something missing from that piece. So I wrote another piece. In between, I had, part of this continuing correspondence that I have with Rob McCaskill. And so there's this whole section. It's got a longer title, but it's, making sausage with Rob McCaskill, more sausage with Rob McCaskill was this piece. So, but since these 3 pieces were written in that nearness of time, they are dealing with the same thing, and it's sort of same things, and it kind of works with the transformation of the blog. So I decided to put the 3 of them together. Now this is my second attempt at doing a video of this, because I did the video at first and I got everything screwed up on the computer, and there were these really long pauses where I was trying to find the segments on the blog. So, there's like 15 seconds of dead air or something. That didn't work. And then the Alexa went off into God knows why. The Alexa went off in my apartment, and there was that interruption. And I was trying to really bull through it and trying to improvise around it to a certain extent to make it work. But, that's a habit that I have to break, because that's something that I did typically on stage a lot when I was a comic performer, because that's on stage and that's the event. But this is actually something, this is a stream of something that I want to say here. And then all of a sudden it's being devalued by all these extraneous comments that aren't there for any reason at all, except to cover up for technical difficulties. And that doesn't make a lot of sense. So really, and then when I went into it, I started the video that ended up not working. I started by saying the first piece that I wrote on Bombshell, I was completely dissatisfied with, and I didn't think it was good, and I thought the one that I did this morning was better. But then I had the experience of reading it aloud for the video, and I don't think it's bad. But there's 2 aspects of it. I don't think, when I put the hashtags on it, as I like to do, I think I just used the hashtags Bombshell and spoken word. I think what I was writing there was specifically spoken word. It wasn't, I was right to be dissatisfied with it as writing, but it was a spoken word piece. I mean, it was specifically of that genre. But the other part of it is that it was fine as it was, and it was pretty good. But I think the second piece, Bombshell piece, that I wrote this morning was influenced by actually the more sausage with Rob McCaskill piece that I wrote in the middle, which actually I'm making a decision now as we're taping. I am not going to do first one Bombshell, then Bombshell 2, then swing around back to more sausage with Rob. I'm going to read these in sequence the way they were written, which I think is going to make more sense. But the dissatisfaction that I felt about the Bombshell piece was just a feeling of a greater responsibility to my writing, or generally the process of writing this blog is that I kind of when I several months ago I reviewed all of the blog and also writing I did before the blog from like 2011 to early 2019, and I separated out the pieces that I thought was real writing. So I think from almost the very beginning of this, because I've really been doing this seriously now for 9 years, and from the beginning of it, there were always these stretches where there was real writing in there. But then there were other things that were good. They were okay, for whatever they were. Some of them, I was teaching at the time, so some of them were useful academically, and some of them were good for stating opinions or there were several things that I wrote during the rise of Trump that I would put into that category, that it was more like commentary. It was the writing of a citizen, but it's not what I call real writing. And I'm not going to define it at this moment right here. There's something more to it. There's something more to it, and I think probably and I think most of my recent writing, even for maybe even the last year or more, has been, most of it's been going down that real writing track. And I think probably my unease this morning was that when I did the bombshell piece that I wrote yesterday, I thought that I was sliding back a bit. But then, like I say, when I read it for the video that I ended up having to delete because all the technical problems, I actually thought it was okay for what it was. And you obviously, I'm not going to say you will decide on all of this, but this is the framework of what we're doing today. So in this video, I'm going to read the last 3 segments that I did on the Rick blog. And we're going to start with 12/22/19, Bombshell, Fascist on Fascist Crime. Boo-hoo. In the new movie Bombshell, which deals with the sexual harassment scandal at Fox News Network in 2016, John Lithgow says in character as the subsequently disgraced Roger Ailes, the Fox News CEO and chairman, bullies aren't mean. Bullying is the way the more powerful control the less powerful. A title card near the end of the movie informs the audience that Ailes and fellow more powerful Fox bully, Bill O'Reilly, received much more money in severance packages than the women that they bullied received in court settlements. Boo-hoo squared. The medium of bullying was sexual harassment. Somewhere a baby in a cage at the southern border is saying, "Me too." Or a person dying of no health insurance. Or the millions of people oppressed by the immoral political culture that Fox News has energetically promoted and in some cases created with its cocktail of lies and propaganda for disgusting, immoral anti-values and political figures, most notably Herr Trump. I have more sympathy for prostitutes abused by their pimps than for the women degraded by their bosses at Fox. I imagine that prostitutes are forced to that horrible lifestyle by ignorance and desperation. Prostitutes are usually born powerless, oppressed to a condition. I've been making these Freudian slips with this thing. I said sex instead of six. I said oppressed instead of oppressed. But, anyway, back to this. Now, I would put that in the category of probably a useless digression. I thought it was going somewhere, and it didn't. That's one of the things about improvisation. I think I only did it once in my life, that where with these written pieces and then improvising off of it, where where I thought that it worked. But I'm going to keep at it. I'm going to keep at it because this is the process of the Rick blog, and more, what I'm finding is that the process is actually part of the content of the Rick blog, and and then when I think about it, maybe I'm being overly critical about the improvisation because I improvised that whole thing at the beginning, setting up these three segments. I said I was going to read them in chronological order, so I made that decision to change it. I talked about the entire experience of it. One of the last videos I did, the make not what I'm going to read here, but the making sausage with Rob McCaskill. I did a whole riff of improvisation, talking about different experiences that I had as a comedian, and that was all very successful. So here's something that I'm learning within the improvisation, and I found this a couple times too when looking at past writing. Although it doesn't come out as much with other writing, you know, sometimes there are little chinks in the armor, like little lacks of confidence about. It would be all right to say that when I said, "Oh, breast," and the thing about 40 and slips, it would be all right to say, "Well, that was an improvised foray that really didn't work. I thought it was going somewhere and it didn't." And that's going to happen anytime that you have an improvisational element to what you're doing. But what was wrong was, as I said, there was only one time where I felt it worked, and that's really not true. And it just worked now, and it worked pretty easily. So these are the thing. I'll tell you something. Anybody that thinks writing is easy, it isn't. The the rewriting and everything people talk about, they think that's the hard part of it. The real hard part of it is the living. The real hard part is that if you want to write better, you got to keep changing, and you sort of have to live in this zone of uncertainty where you're always trying to figure things out. You assign yourself the position of being a perpetual novice. And now this piece is getting better. This improvisation helps make this piece better because, yeah, I'll just say it. I don't just want to write my take on Fox News. I want to write something more than that. You know, something that's not an opinion. And frankly, even in my lesser stuff, I'm always a little bit insulted when people say, "Well, that's your opinion." It's not an opinion. And an opinion is when you look at something and say, "Well, this is my idea of it," or "I like it," or "I don't like it," or something. That's not what I'm doing here. I mean, I'm trying to understand the nature of reality. It doesn't mean that I'm right necessarily. As a matter of fact, I never am. No one is. You got to keep looking at it and keep trying to understand it. But I never want to be in the position of just coming out and like stating my views. And in the tone of that, and a lot of times when people hear it as opinion, sometimes that works in my favor in terms of whether they're going to have a favorable attitude about what I'm writing, because what they hear is my confidence in saying what I'm saying, because the writing does. I do have a strong voice when I write. It's very direct, and I come out and say things very directly. But it's a hell of a lot of work. It's a struggle to get to clarity or even the perception of clarity. It's a struggle to get to some point of understanding. I don't speak so directly this way in order to be dogmatic. It's like because I think I'm trying to get a handle on reality. I'm not trying to persuade you to my point of view, or make you think that I'm right. I mean, I'm not in the opinion game. And I think some of my doubts about this piece was when I woke up this morning, as I said, well, Yeah, because I right now I self-publish on social media. So and I don't look at social media largely. I mean, I don't look at what other people publish or whatever. I just put my stuff out there because I don't want to be just another asshole, like saying, "Oh, I don't like Trump," and and this is the muffin that I had at the airport. I mean, I really and I listen to those jokes. Okay, those are sort of jokes, and that's falling back into a structure. And I don't think those jokes are particularly good. I don't think they're particularly funny. Uh, and they're so I would say that's another improvised foray that I don't think was worth it. I think it undermines what I was saying. It was an improvisation on top of an improvisation. And I think it undermines the improvisation that I was saying about that what I'm not my purpose is not to state my opinions. My purpose is to state my truth, reality. Is there such a thing as absolute truth? Yes, there is. Can anyone possibly perceive absolute truth? No, you can't. Because no, I can't. No, you can't. No, anyone can't. Because no one can be omniscient. So we're just, and I've said this in different places before, but it bears repeating in this context. I'm just a little infinitesimal, less than infinitesimal speck in the universe. There's the expanse of the universe, and there's me. And I'm nothing. I'm nothing. I'm smaller than the smallest piece of dust in your apartment. I'm nothing. And on the other hand, because it's the universe and because it has no boundaries, any point is the center. So in one case, it's just like one point within this huge, you know, uh, a piece of lint in the biggest mall parking lot in the world, just laying there. On the other hand, it's the center of everything. So, what is the truth from the perspective of that particular center? The paradox of being completely insignificant and to being the center of the world. All right, back to this text here about this movie that that really, you know, this to me this is getting more and more interesting to me because I swear to you, by February, I'm going to barely remember this movie. It's going to come up on Amazon Prime or something. I'm going to see the little poster card that they have, and I'm going to say, "Oh yeah, I saw that." I mean, this is really an unimportant experience in my life. The fact that I went to see this movie, and yet it is an experience, and it can teach something. So I'll get back to it. I was talking about prostitutes. So I have more sympathy for prostitutes abused by their pimps than for the women degraded by their bosses at Fox. I imagine the prostitutes are forced to that horrible lifestyle by ignorance and desperation. Prostitutes are usually born powerless, oppressed to a condition of few or no choices. Prostitutes are exploited by criminals, most usually men. The whores of Fox News are a different story. Megan, Kelly, Gretchen Carlson, and the fictional Kayla, played by Margot Robbie, wanted power as much as Roger Ailes or Bill O'Reilly. Kelly sucked dick to get it. Carlson was pissed off because she was demoted. Kelly and Carlson had other motives too, better ones. They wanted to be journalists, but that begs the question, what were they doing at Fox News? Kelly and Carlson felt guilty. They cooperated with something evil and made things harder for the more innocent, but equally ambitious Kayla and many more like her. If Bombshell was more about Kelly and Carlson's journey to repentance and redemption, and to be fair, the movie alludes to that complexity, but not emphatically enough to my satisfaction, it would have been a better movie. To be explicit and obvious, Ailes and O'Reilly were pieces of shit. What they did was an abomination, and the women were victims. But the women were not only victims of Ailes and O'Reilly's pathetic evil, trolls equating sex for power because they were skilled at getting the latter and incapable of getting the former without bribery and coercion. I didn't enjoy being in the company of these creeps of both genders for 2 hours at the movies. I've had a bellyful of them for the last 40 years. I feel superior to the women of Bombshell. I've had more than my share of bad bosses, mostly men, but a few women too. While it's true none of my would-be oppressors ever forced me to fuck them, they attempted to demean me in other ways. I was like Kayla, an innocent on each job, thinking the places were better than they were. I was ambitious to work on the side of the angels. And like Kayla, I was confronted with deformed trolls. But here's the difference. I never took their shit. I never compromised my dignity. I never did the immoral shit that they tried to bully me into doing. I never placed my ambition over my mission. I never rationalized and said, if I suck some dick, I'll get to a position of power and then things will be different. I risked unpopularity in the workplace. I quit or was fired. I always failed up. Each wrenching separation led to greater knowledge about myself and greater skill at sharing what I have to offer. None of this makes me a hero. It makes me a human being. It might be argued that it's different for women. The women have to work harder to be confident because of the centuries of oppression that they have endured. That's certainly true. But the women of Bombshell were pretty damn confident, more confident than I have ever been. They lost a power struggle to men who had all of the advantages. But in the end, they were betrayed by their own mediocrity. They wanted money and fame and success, and most importantly, power. And they wanted to be good journalists and moms and pioneers for other women. Sorry, it doesn't work that way. You have to choose humanity or bullshit. We all make mistakes. We all can get greedy or power hungry. We all can repent and get back on the right track. The women of Bombshells aren't heroes, and their victimhood is a small part of the story. The women of Fox News were useful idiots in the rise of the new American autocracy. They liked the money and the clothes and the attention, and the very evil that they served feasted upon them. They got multi-million dollar settlements, but not as much as Ailes and O'Reilly. Boo-hoo. The people of Puerto Rico lost loved ones when the autocracy ignored their hurricane. Ditto the Bahamas. Genocide was brought to the Kurds. Police misconduct brought violence to African Americans. Public schools have faded, failing in their mission. Hungry people are denied food stamps. What am I missing? Kids getting sick from emphysema because the air is so foul. Just open up a newspaper or wherever you get your news and look at all the stories. And it's not just that the media makes money off of bad news and that's all they show. There is a lot of great stuff happening in the world. But there's a lot of evil and there's a lot of turmoil as well, which is facilitated and promoted by institutions like Fox News. American democracy is gasping for life. All of this suffering was aided and abetted by the sexual harassment victims of Fox News. Talk about bombshells. Boo hoo. Copyright 2019, Richard Thomas. Okay, so that's part one of this trilogy on this video. So this is covering December the 22nd, 2019, and the morning of December the 23rd, 2019. And now this is part of what's turning into a series of my correspondence with Rob McCaskill. And the title of this piece is More Sausage with Rob McCaskill, Literature, the Temporal and the Divine, Male Friendship, and Other Stories in Progress. So Rob wrote me on Saturday, December the 21st at 12:46 p.m. I'd heard of Henry Miller before ever reading his work, not just his scandalous reputation, but reference to his achievement, his skill and talent pointed out, even by those who condemned him. When I finally picked up Tropic of Capricorn and read a dozen pages, I was surprised to see it was written more or less as Henry's journal. Then later, reading Kerouac, I saw a similar style, a daily account, and also heard that Hemingway's friends were shocked to see their lives portrayed exactly as they happened. These writers shaped their notes, of course, shading, arranging events into art. But I could feel a difference reading Gatsby and then The Sun Also Rises. Gatsby is more of a painting, while Hemingway's more photographic. Your segments, written or read aloud, demand to be heard as works of actual literature, cooked fast after decades of preparation. And I find that my mind does absorb them that way. Like what you said as a teen about Protestants overhauling the church, but leaving out the art. Too bad. They were right to dump the weight of Rome, rejecting the sale of indulgences. But then the dry parts of their minds turned poetry into reporting. What if we had a culture as deep as what we see in Tibet, but with our Western knack for innovation? Enjoyed your layout of post-war American stand-up, especially the part concerning the club that commodifies with time limits. What if instead they only chose artists who could tell them on their own when to stop? And then I answered Rob at 12 Sunday, so I answered him a day later at 12:22 at 12:11 p.m. Rob, these are the most useful comments that I've heard regarding my writing. A few years ago, I went to the Iowa Summer Writers Workshop for 9 days. This email is more valuable than that experience in its entirety. You offer practical observations here, a template of discernment, a description of the right people. I saw something about Hawthorne getting Melville, understanding Melville, at a crucial time in the development of Moby Dick. I feel like we are in a Hawthorne Melville moment. And then I quote Rob's letter, quote, the part concerning the club that commodifies with time limits. What if instead they only chose artists who could tell on their own when to stop? Now, this insight shows genius in its simplicity, a demonstration of your, Rob's, producer's art. Writer, actor, teacher, coach, director, producer, diverse and unified. I'm fascinated by guys like you, so broad and deep in their talents, diverse in their work with a single focus. The actors that you coach went to the right guy. You sensitively take people and their work for who and what they are. You put them and their work into an educated and sophisticated context, and in so doing, say the right thing at precisely the right time. Gentle and surgical direction. You are the same guy that I knew 30 years ago. Same humanity and talent, plus 30 years of work. You have developed yourself to your highest potential as an artist and a man. Congratulations. I am proud to be your friend. Excellence. Here's to excellence. I'm sure that I embarrassed you here, but you mentioned me in a tradition with Miller, Kerouac, and Hemingway. So I guess we are even. Your enthusiasm and encouragement of what is fine in people is beautiful. Artists love art. And now I quote Rob again, and when he said, "Your segments, written or read aloud, demand to be heard as works of actual literature, cooked fast after decades of preparation, and I find that my mind does absorb them that way." That's the end of his quote. This is the best description of my process that I've heard, and a wonderful, positive, and affirming understanding of deep creativity. I am so happy that my writing has value for you. Art is a two-way street. I get so much out of our dialogue. Point well taken on selling indulgences. Art as baby in corrupt bathwater. Now I quote Rob again. What if we had a culture as deep as what we see in Tibet, but with our Western knack for innovation? And that's the end of that quote. And I respond to that quote with a rather long and dense paragraph, which I'm going to read now. Jung wrote something about the marriage of East and West in religion. I read it years and years ago. I don't remember the title or much about it. It might be a lead. I remember Joseph Campbell, who was big on Jung, had material on how the East has closer access to the all, and the West was better at the individual. I think that is what his Folly or Bliss was about, moving from the universal space within us, inflected by the particulars of our individual lives. I agree with your provocation. East and West should be integrated. Bloom, that's Harold Bloom, the literary critic, actually writer, Bloom on self-overhearing in Hamlet seemed to be getting at that. Getting to know oneself and what one is to do. Not making it up. Not from ego. The ego is the defender of the true self when used properly, not the source of the true self. Western ego, when nobly applied, brings Eastern participation in divinity down to earth. The Catholic Catechism says that emotions are neutral and that our rationality mediates them, understands them. Our emotions, like our dreams, are messages from God. My work always starts with a feeling. It never starts with an idea. The ideas come after the inspiration. James Hillman's acorn theory. We don't grow up, we grow down. We are born in an embodiment of the all, and then we learn how to act from that place in the creation of our individual lives. I've never invented myself. I work to be myself. My limitations are not of self, they are limits of consciousness. The transformation from comedy to literature, for example, was not a change of the all in me. It was a growth in my understanding of what the all is. And the all aids externally, like when you show up as Hawthorne, and when you say that my work helps you. So the all is at work there too. This harmony, all these individual lives spontaneously forming one thing. Blake said eternity is in love with the productions of time. Mortality needs eternity. Eternity needs mortality. East needs West. West needs East. We wonder about the existence of God, and God wonders about the existence of man. God and man each need the other to fulfill their purposes. God is the more reliable partner, but man is more free. God just is. We say to be or not to be. Real action happens when we live our lives congruent with the inspirations of God, inspirations that He gives us constantly. If we didn't have to work on figuring out God's messages, we'd have nothing to do, and we wouldn't be men. We'd be something else. Reality is too big for us to see in total. So living is an act of faith, an enthusiastic participation in mystery. All identifications with God substitutes, power, money, fame, sex, other stuff, things not necessarily bad in themselves, that become destructive when worshiped, false idols that alienate us from our authenticity, are born out of fear and desire, those obstructions to intimacy with the Buddha. God is simple, our road to Him is complex, makes life interesting. This is all about something that I am guessing exists in science as well as religion. The scientists who plumb the sources of creation, energy, time, and space speak of these same things. I believe art is a lot like science, reality from different access points. God wouldn't be so miserly to require an MIT PhD as a prerequisite to talking to Him. I was out running around yesterday and fell asleep in my chair upon my return. Apologies for the delayed response, but it worked out because I needed to reflect on your comments a bit more anyway. Have a great day, Rob. And then I write a brief email to Rob again, Sunday, 12/22 at 12:30 p.m. And I say, Rob, I want to publish this and include all of my embarrassing praise of you. I think it makes a universal point. You should be held out as an example. I wonder if it would come across as gay. I wondered, past tense. I wondered if it would come across as gay if shared with strangers. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it is inaccurate. But since we are talking about literature and Hawthorne and Emerson came up, this is how men wrote each other in the 1800s. Perhaps that should be restored. Men, all men, not just artists, need this type of mutual affirmation of their best creative impulses. Men are wired to make things, and we can support ourselves in higher aspirations than success and competition. My writing begins as the admiration of a friend, but I want to say to the greater world, look at that. Honor that. Be like that. And Rob responded to me on Sunday, December the 22nd at 3:08 p.m. Hey, Rick, okay by me to let folks listen in. And if people misunderstand and imagine I'm gay, I'd be honored. Right now, the powder of what you are saying is sifting through the words you wrote, piling into meaning. The various cultural pieces you gather combine, forming a kind of encouragement, permission to think from the more adept person within. That persona within us each may be the famous beloved who poets write verse to. I'll need to let what you've said explain itself to me. Might take a sleep cycle or two. And then me back to Rob, 12:22 at 3:11 p.m. Okay, pal, until next time. So that's the second in this trilogy of segments that I wrote on December the 22nd. And actually, in the second piece, it's kicked off by an email that Rob wrote on December the 21st. But that was the second one on December the 22nd. And now here's the last in the trilogy. And it's It's the one that I wrote this morning on 12/23. And this piece is called More on Bombshell. It's no Maisel. And by the way, that's not only a reference to the marvelous Mrs. Maisel, although obviously it's primarily a reference to that. It's also a reference to a previous segment that I wrote, The Unfairly Maligned Mrs. Maisel, which where I stated my admiration for the show, The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. Yesterday's segment about the movie Bombshell is nagging at me. It feels incomplete. I don't do reviews. I'm an experience processor. Every experience teaches me something. Every moment has meaning. Even the experience of watching a movie that I will forget about in a week's time has meaning. I just have to figure it out. Writing is just a means of talking to myself and you. That talk dissects the last moment and allows me to live the next moment more consciously. One has heard from an early age that it is important to know oneself and to learn about the world. Oneself and the world are not static things. Writing puts one into the flow of understanding and takes place in the regions of mystery. It's kind of like being a satellite propelled into the deep regions of space, consistently sending data back to Earth, expanding what is known while moving forward into vast unexplored darkness. The depths of the self are as limitless as the unbordered universe. When the satellite gets beyond the point of radio contact with the world, the writer dies. Oddly, it is looking at the features of outer space that is most instructive in understanding the features of the self. That's why you're bothering to read me. You want to see something in my words that reverberates in yourself, or go someplace with these words that you have never been. There's no frigate like a book. Boy, I made that mistake on the first take of this too. There's no frigate like a boat. Well, that's obviously true. But there's no frigate like a book or submarine, depending on where you're going. I was disappointed with my data collection as I flew over the planet Bombshell. I only got information over my citizenship frequencies, but my artist circuits were still processing. Bombshell is a dangerous movie because it looks at present evil in a compromised and calculated way. It tries to tell a story that won't alienate liberals or conservatives. It tries to make morally compromised characters sympathetic. Bombshell is written in a narrow, self-serving way. It humanizes real people who are engaging crimes against humanity right now on December 23rd, 2019. Bombshell doesn't want to be too scary or judgmental at a moment of accelerating cruelty and increasing and ambitious tyranny. Bombshell is about justice for the privileged while ignoring the oppression of the weak. The movie points out that we need journalism and not infotainment. We need facts, not propaganda. I will point out that we also need art and not show business. We need reality, not escape. We need consideration of the interconnected world, not just our own problems, even when they are quite serious and real. I favor Elizabeth Warren in the Democratic presidential primary because her specific plans reflect a coherent and accurate vision of what is currently happening in the world. Caged babies at the border, income inequality, endless foreign wars, and all the other social ills, including sexual harassment in the workplace, are all the result of thought manipulation and bullying by powerful forces who want to deny us freedom so that they can subjugate us and control our lives. Warren uses every crime against us in two ways. She addresses it specifically and points to it as a metaphor with the big picture. That's what art should do. The symbol of the great white whale in Moby Dick ultimately points to something beyond words. The world is demanding that we consider the nature of existence. Can salesmen convince us to surrender our power of self determination? Can bosses degrade and bully us in order to exploit our very lives as raw material for their profit? Can we survive without solidarity? Can we survive without seeing ourselves in the suffering of a refugee baby in a concentration camp? Can we work for the men and women who want to destroy us and call it making a living? I am watching season 3 of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel for a second time. Paula is home for the holiday and she hasn't seen it. The writers are professional comedy writers. They have come from show business. They use the craft of the sitcom, the clever patter invented by Neil Simon. The Maisel writers use the Neil Simon-esque craft of the sitcom. What makes what they do art is what they use that craft for. Mrs. Maisel uses what they know how to do. Mrs. Maisel's writers use what they know how to do to discuss love and courage. They create something highly enjoyable, but the show is not an escape. The show is about love and courage, and it resonates with people who aren't female comics trying to make it in the 1960s. The Rick blog is an amplified journal. When I'm good and when you are good, it is as much about you as it is me. Maisel is as good as Moby Dick in all of the important ways. Of course, Moby Dick is much more intellectual than Maisel, and the craft involved in creating the novel is infinitely more intricate and involved than Maisel. It was harder to write Moby Dick than The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. But each piece is a satellite in space sending data back to Earth. Each piece are chapters in the never finished user's manual for the operation of the human being. So is the Warren campaign. We are at a decision point: slavery and murder suicide, or love and freedom. My first response to Bombshell was that I didn't have a response. Then I had a revulsion to the characters, and I wrote about that in the first Bombshell segment. Today, I focus more on the writers of Bombshell than its story. I am not interested in the words of people who are just looking for a hit. How small are the concerns of such writers? The screenplay never questions the ambitions of its characters. It shows them as pariahs, tainted by their association with Fox News. But it doesn't question why they made the choice of Fox in the first place. They bury the lead. The untold story beneath the corrupted script of Bombshell is the evil unleashed by pursuing success, by achieving the ends of greedy, genocidal nihilists. The untold story of Bombshell continues. Fox News is a metaphor, a great white whale that represents something beyond words, a sickness found on Main Street in every town in America, the abuser in every incestuous family, Chinatown was a better movie about Fox News than Bombshell. Fox News is the whisper we all hear in the moments of our darkest despair, the glancing split second thought that we dismiss and tell ourselves that we never had, that hisses, maybe I'll just kill myself instead of face the world today. The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel says, live, joy. Moby Dick says, work, struggle, overcome the evil whale, love the cosmic force of the whale. No wonder I first didn't want to write about Bombshell and then did a half-assed job of it. Copyright 2019, Richard Thomas. Okay, well, that was pretty ambitious. It's a pretty ambitious video. All right. See you next time.